Since its world premiere at the Venice Film Festival, the movie Joker has received strong criticism from several members of the specialized press and critics of cinema. However, most of these criticisms do not arise because the movie is considered bad. In fact, most critics agree that it is a groundbreaking film that shows us one of the best performances in Joaquin Phoenix's career, a career that is already full of great performances. The problem is that many people consider this movie to be dangerous precisely because of the topics it touches on and the way it presents them. This has caused the Joker movie to be embroiled in a great controversy that goes far beyond a discussion about whether the movie is good or not. A controversy that touches on topics about social responsibility in art, mass murders, the Incel subculture, and finally the influence that the Joker could have on society. Hello dear geekers, how are you? I'm Go, the Geek Monitor. Welcome to this new video essay. If it's your first time on the channel, I'll tell you that here I like to take comics very seriously and analyze them in depth to be able to see beyond the obvious. Today, I will explain in depth all the controversy of the Joker movie. I'm going to tell you how it started, what it's about, and what the viewpoints are on it, so that by the end of the video, you can have your own opinion. You'll see that it's a much more complicated topic than most people want to think. This video will not contain any spoilers for the Joker movie. Chapter 1. Does cinema have a social responsibility? When the first negative reviews of the Joker movie came out, saying that it was not a bad movie but a dangerous one, a controversy erupted in which the central issue is precisely, do movies have a social responsibility? This refers to the fact that some people think that cinema, television, and cultural productions in general have to show us a positive social message. This presents us with a big problem as we can't always make stories where we see Batman win and the villains pay for their actions because the reality of our world is not like that. Remember, good fiction is a reflection of our reality. So, no, cinema does not have a social responsibility in that sense. However, cinema does have social consequences, as we as viewers are the ones who give meaning to the movie. Anthropologist Maria Paz Bajas says in an essay about cinema, artist's work and viewer are part of a creative act. According to her, the director of a movie, in this case Todd Phillips, is the one who presents you with the images, guides the performances, and presents the events ordered in a specific way to give you a specific message. In this case of the Joker movie, the director said that his work speaks about the lack of love, a traumatic childhood, and the lack of compassion in the world. This message, along with the performances, the script, and other production elements, only that result in Todd Phillips's Joker movie, which would surely be very different if it had been directed by Joss Whedon, Michael Bay, or Tim Burton. Since each director gives his style to the movie, the point is that at no time was it Todd Phillips' intention to incite violence. In fact, the same studio said about the movie, neither the fictional character of the Joker nor the movie approve of real violence of any kind. It is not the intention of the film or the filmmakers or the studio to make this character a hero. Okay, so we have that none of those involved in the Joker movie intend for the character to be glorified. However, let's remember that there is one more element involved in the creative process, and that is the viewer. It turns out that we as viewers are the ones who ultimately give meaning to the movie and complete the creative process. In this case, we do it by putting together what Todd Phillips presented to us in the Joker movie, what we already know about the character from 80 years of movies and comics, and above all, the social context in which we live. Film directors then have to be aware that we will put all this together and give the movie its own meaning. This does not mean that the Joker movie is dangerous. It means that cinema is not a closed discourse as many people think, in which only the director can tell you what the movie is about. It means that works of art have to do with a social context, and this is inevitable not only in cinema but also in other artistic disciplines. In fact, the artist Marcel Duchamp, one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, said against all opinion, "It is not the painters, but the viewers who make the pictures." Now that we know that movies do not have a social responsibility, but they do have social consequences, we have to ask ourselves, why has there been such a big controversy with the Joker movie if the character has been around for about 80 years? Well, it seems that one of the problems is in its new origin. Chapter 2. The problem of the new origin. Joker is one of the most iconic villains in the comic industry and the main antagonist of Batman. However, throughout his nearly 80 years of existence, both in comics and series, cartoons and movies, we had never seen the character unleash a controversy as big as the one we see today, and I think the main problem has to do with the new origin that is given to the character. When we first saw the character in Batman comic number 1 from 1940, Joker is presented to us as a cruel killer about whom we knew nothing. Joker simply appeared out of nowhere in Gotham City and Batman had to deal with him, something that was not strange since it was really uncommon for the comics of that time to explain the origin of the villains and even of the heroes. In fact, it took 11 years for DC in 1951 to finally publish the first origin of the character with the Comic Detective Comics 168. In this story, Joker reveals that he was a worker at a card factory who decided to rob the company. To do this, he adopted the name of Red Hood and got a helmet that would allow him to sneak through some chemical waste ducts. His crime was a complete success, but the chemicals he exposed himself to during the robbery would dye his skin white. Joker realized that his new appearance terrified people, and since he had stolen from a card company, he decided to take on the name Joker. Here, as we can see, this comic tells us a highly fanciful story that even borders on the ridiculous when we judge it with current parameters. Another very important thing is that according to this origin, Joker was always evil and the chemicals did nothing to change his personality. Time passed, and in 1988, writer Alan Moore decided to expand this origin in the comic The Killing Joke. In this new origin, Jack was a failed comedian who lived with his pregnant wife in poverty. One day, with the intention of improving his living situation, he decided to help some criminals rob the chemical factory where he previously worked. For this, the criminals tricked him into wearing the Red Hood uniform and blaming him for the crime in case they were caught. On the day of the crime, Jack found out that his wife had died from electrocution in an accident and tried to stop the robbery, as he no longer had reasons to continue with it. However, the criminals forced him to continue with the plan. That night, everything goes wrong. The robbers are shot by the factory security and Batman tries to catch Red Hood, who accidentally falls into a vat of chemicals. When Jack finally escapes and sees his disfigured face, he realizes that he has lost everything that day, and the worst day of his life ends when he decides to take his own existence as a joke. Here, as we can see, this new origin introduces several iconic elements of the character. We have the fact that Joker was a normal person who lost his mind due to a series of tragedies he suffered the same day, and we have the concept that Batman is partially responsible for the creation of his greatest nemesis, which makes the relationship between Batman and Joker more meaningful. This origin is so effective that it regularly appears in other Batman cartoons and movies. However, this origin also retains a strong dose of fantasy, as it involves mysterious chemicals, a series of coincidences, and above all the participation of the Batman character. In the case of the Joker movie, Todd Phillips said that his film takes place in a fictional world. It can have invocations of the real world, choices, but it is a fictional character in a fictional world that has existed for 80 years. And he's right. However, all these fantastic elements that are part of the language of comics and fantasy, elements that make us think of completely fictional stories, in his film are replaced by others that we could consider more real. We then have situations in which Arthur Fleck, the name of the new protagonist, suffers at the hands of society and is methodically humiliated and kicked by it, culminating in Arthur feeling the desire to take revenge on the same society that sees him suffer. These elements make the movie move away from the comics to enter the territory of films like Taxi Driver, which is not a bad thing in itself. However, the movie seems to speak more directly to people, and I think that's where the controversy comes from. And this is something we had never seen from the Joker, even in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, a movie that also has this more real approach. The origin of the character is never presented to us. So the focus of the movie has a lot to do with the controversy. But what are they so worried about? That is, what makes many people consider this discourse potentially dangerous today? Chapter 3: Joker, Violence and the Incel Subculture. Perhaps if the Joker movie had been released 20 years ago, it wouldn't have sparked such a big controversy. It's true that this has to do with the fact that nowadays, people tend to pay more attention to the messages given within series, movies, and even cartoons. The truth is that this topic of so-called political correctness gives us enough material for a completely separate video. However, besides this issue, there are two major concerns surrounding the Joker movie: the Aurora Massacre and the Incel subculture. The Aurora Massacre is the 2012 attack in which the young man James Holmes attacked the audience attending the midnight screening of Christopher Nolan's movie The Dark Knight Rises. This massacre, in addition to gaining notoriety for the number of dead and injured, was under the spotlight for a long time due to being linked to a superhero movie and the appearance of James Holmes, who had dyed hair the night of the crime. So many people assumed that this massacre had something to do with the Joker character. However, this is completely false, as Holmes has never directly or indirectly mentioned that his crime was inspired by any movie or series. Rather, it was a disturbed young man with a sadistic plan who simply sought a large crowd of people. In fact, upon learning about the Joker movie, the parents of those affected in the Aurora Massacre sent a letter to Warner Brothers saying, "When we learned that Warner Brothers would release a movie called Joker that presents the protagonist with a compassionate origin story, it made us pause. We want to be clear in the fact that we support your freedom of speech and expression, but as anyone who has seen a comic book movie can tell you, with great power comes great responsibility. That's why we're asking you to use your influence to join us in our fight to build safer communities with fewer guns." Here, as we see, the parents of those affected in the Aurora attack are not calling for a boycott against the Joker movie. They are not even directly speaking out against it. However, they are asking Warner Brothers to help them with a very important issue within the United States, one that is a much more direct responsible for the violence in the country. And I'm referring to the poorly regulated sale of firearms. This brings us to the last point of the Joker controversy, which has to do with a subculture called Incels. And many say that the Joker movie speaks directly to them. Incels are a subculture that was born in the mid-90s on internet forums. They are characterized by not having a partner or romantic relationships due to their shyness or lack of social skills. In fact, incel comes from the phrase involuntarily celibate, and it precisely originated in support groups where tips and support were given to help cope with their situation. However, as time went on, the new incels began creating increasingly toxic communities that coexist under an ideology called Black Pill, in which women are seen as superficial and cruel creatures who only choose the most attractive men. The violence of the incel culture has reached such a degree that several of the recent shootings in the United States have been perpetrated by people who call themselves incels or coexist with their ideologies. That's why many people fear that the Joker movie will give the incels a hero to aspire to, something that John Wick killing 300 people, an example put by Todd Phillips himself, could not be, so John Wick does not arouse the same controversy. And all these social issues that are completely unrelated to the Joker movie unfortunately influence the way we, the viewers, will see the movie, as we will see Joker through the eyes of our social context to give our own meaning to the movie. That's why the controversy of Joker is much stronger in the United States, a country where mass shootings have been increasing each year, to the point where, in 2019, they have had on average 1.2 mass shootings per day. It's clear to me that it's unfair to completely blame a movie for violent acts in a country with poor gun control, where xenophobia and intolerance seem to grow every day, something that has nothing to do with the comics. However, it's also naive to think that a product aimed at so many people won't have social consequences, positive or negative. That's why, for me, the really dangerous thing is to say, it's just a movie, since ideas are precisely what have the ability to transform the world. So, analyzing and determining whether a movie is dangerous or not depends on each of us, but we have to be willing to look beyond the obvious to be able to do it. However, I think this is precisely one of the most beautiful points of cinema, that it is not a closed discourse. If you look closely, the artist is the one who has the ability to perceive reality in a different way. The work of art is a reflection of society, and it is society precisely who gives meaning to the work, thus complementing the creative process of cinema. If you enjoyed this video essay, check out my video on the Captain Marvel controversy. Special thanks to historian Ana Paniagua for her research assistance and review of my notes. Her social media links are in the video description. That's all for now. I'm Go the Geek Monitor, and I'll see you next time.